The American Journal of Endocannabinoid Medicine welcomes you to AJEM Live.
Hello, this is AJEM Live, where we interview physicians on the front lines of endocannabinoid medicine and the scientists behind the industry's top research trials. I am AJEM's editor-in-chief, Dr. Leslie Apgar, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Hyder Khoja, all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia, which is fantastic. Now, Dr. Khoja has quite an impressive bio. So Dr. Hyder Khoja, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to let you take it away. Tell us a little bit about your bio, your educational history, and then we'll do a dive into how in the heck you got involved in the psychedelic sciences.
Hi, thank you so very much for inviting me on this conversation portfolio for a lot of learners around, and same way I would learn from. So I come from a very diverse background. I brought up and raised in Pakistan and had my bachelor's and master's in plant breeding and genetics. And from there, I moved to France, did my doctorate in 2003. I worked on ripening processes, delaying the ripening process of the fruit so the fruit can stay longer in the shelf life, genetically enhancing the ability to be more robust and more quality-wise good. That was my PhD in 2003. I moved back from there to, after finishing Michigan State University in the United States, did my first postdoctorate on a heat shock proteins, molecular chaperones, at Michigan State University, East Lansing. Later on, I became a junior faculty to work at Virginia Tech, working on the black strawberry flavonoids and how they are good enough as an antioxidant properties, looking into fighting cancer and capturing the free radicals in the body. From there on, I moved to University of Wyoming, Laramie, where I worked on bacteria, cell motility, how they communicate, and then keep moving from there and came back to Lubbock, Texas, where I started working at University of Texas as Health Science Center, working with a gastroenterologist on human gut diseases when the parasite hits the human guts and how we can find the remedy. From there on, moving forward, I went to work for a U.S. Department of Energy on an algae project where we were extracting biodiesel, actually extracting lipids and making biodiesel from an algae. And then finally, we decided to move to Canada. The first thing I came to Canada, coming from all those experiences and postdoctoral experiences in special areas, I thought that there should be something that I'm interested in going into, which is in pharmacology. So I ended up coming to Vancouver, a beautiful place to live as well to raise kids. I found working with Dr. David Suzuki is one of the green initiative person, and he's a geneticist by profession. One of his projects was to raise black soldier flies. Black soldier flies larvae eat a lot of organic waste, and when they eat organic waste, they accumulate a lot of proteins. And the idea behind that project was to extract that proteins and make a fish feed for fish farming industry. So that was a start for me to come here. But during that phases, I gone through a lot of internship. So I end up also working with one of the companies called Maxam Analytics, looking into the metabolism of the forensic equine drug testing, where they can figure it out if the horses were abused by any medicine so that they can run and win the race. My interest developed to work on pharmacology since it was from past. I developed and put together a thoughts in and worked and co-founded a company called Cannabis Technologies. From there on, that company became called InMed Pharmaceuticals, and we worked on cannabinoid-based glaucoma products. Since then, I'm in the industry of a lot of psychoactive materials, looking into the areas where we can extract naturally those molecules that can help humans, in different ways in mental health, well-beings, and especially in the body and all.
Yes. Hyder, I have to tell you that you're probably one of the most fascinating humans I have ever spoken to. I feel like I could do a podcast on almost every single thing that you just sort of mentioned in passing. I'm a horse person too, so I think that is so interesting to look into the welfare of our equine friends, and obviously your history with the fertilizers and all of your diverse background. It's incredibly fascinating. But you had an experience fairly early on that really got you interested in the brain and in how it works. Can you give our listeners a little bit of that background? I find that story to be incredibly interesting.
It started very early on, 2013. My mother actually was diagnosed with a meningioma tumor. And I was in the United States that days just visiting her, but I was settled down in Vancouver because she was having this meningioma tumor. So we went to a doctor and he said that we needed to do a surgery on her. So they did a 16-hour surgery to remove the brain tumor. Due to the, technical issues in the surgery, they end up going into, not a very positive news out of it. So my mother wasn't able to wake up immediately after surgery. So it took about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks for her to come up. And she just opened her eyes for a few minutes, and then she just saw us and just it couldn't speak. She cannot swallow anything. She lost her speech ability. She lost her understanding. Basically, she lost all the neuron circuits. Probably it was cut off due to surgery. And then she just closed her eyes. And then she was on bed for almost 2 years as a vegetative person. And it really struck me. He said, I'm going through all this phenomenal pharmacological areas. There's no one is doing work on people who are in vegetative state, how we can wake these people up, how they can come back after a traumatic brain injury or a person who got in an accident. So I started my kind of looking into reading a lot in neurons and in the head, what is exactly going on. So I said there's an area called reticulum activating system. It's in our brain which controls the conscious and unconscious part of the brain. And it lets the individual know when you're awake or when you're not awake. It's similar to us when we are asleep. Our conscious mind is there, but our unconscious mind is at sleep. And then the conscious mind tells you there's an alarm that rings at 4 o'clock. If you put an alarm for 4 o'clock, and you need to wake up at 4. So automatically our biological rhythm wakes you up even before the alarm rings, just to alert you that you have to wake up at 4. In many cases, it happens to everyone. But if the alarm rings, we wake up because our senses are working, our hearing senses are working, and we heard it and we say, okay, I have to wake up. For these individuals who are in vegetative states, their circuits are such weak, or they are not capturing the signals from availability from neurons. So the neuron transmitters are providing them signals, bombarding it, but they are passive. They are not active. They are not perceiving it. So that's the reason I found that there's some sort of break in the neuron system or in the mental illness. What happened is either through brain injury, the brain has a certain damage that they cannot receive the signals, or maybe they have gone to a different mode. It's not really receiving. How to correct that? To correct that, I said, this is the way we should look into different molecules that can ignite. Like we have a key in the car, we put it on and turn it on. It should ignite, sparks into the fuel, and the car starts. How we can start that? For example, when traumatic brain injury happens, most of the patients who are in traumatic brain injury, if it's there for a longer period of time, could be 1 week or older, it's hard to bring them back. Reason being because the oxygen has depleted, which supplies the blood and all, and governs all the philosophy behind the neuron of our brain. So I said the timing is so important. People who are in this kind of stage can be revived if a certain kind of molecules that play a role, for example, psilocybin, very well known in this kind of coming industry in psychedelic space. Our brain captures millions of information daily. It's like a unlimited RAM in our brain that captures all the information and all captured. Only the necessary ones are come in front when we need. So we remember our parents, we remember our past, we remember our good friends, we remember our failures, we remember our successes. But only when you ask, what success did you had in grade 2? Which teacher did you like? Automatically that folder comes and the file comes in front of you. Oh, I like my teacher. I like that folder. But if I ask any random question, which is close by how many neighbors you had, which neighbor do you remember? You might not necessarily remember it, but your brain has that memory. Now, these unconscious people has a similar aspects that they have all the hard folders somewhere disturbed due to traumatic brain injury. Now we want to keep this folder back into files, properly arranged, and only molecules can do are these, the psychedelics and cannabinoids that can help bring those circuits back to system, so then they can think back and then they open their eyes. And that's what I'm working on. The other thing is also that these systems of neuron, I would say, are in a sleep mode. They are in a very soothing mode. Basically what happens is there's no supply of current to them. And the current in an analogy way is the neuroplasticity is basically not in a functional mode that is transmitting the information to the right. So anything you feel around or any pain in your body. For example, if I have pain in my shoulder, so it's been told to my neurons that there is a pain. I don't really feel it, but if I put a cream, the transmission, the message goes to my brain saying there's no pain. Same idea when we take a medicine doesn't really go to the pain area. It just goes to your brain, tell them that, no pain is this area. That's the soothing part. So our brain is a complete unit. It's basically the only unit that governs the body. What I'm telling to the medical community, that when brain is dead, don't consider human is dead, because your body is rhythm in the similar way. Your heart is beating very properly. Your blood is circulation. Your skin color is same. You're not wrinkled at that time. Try to revive them. It's a jump start, same as a CPR. Just find some ways where these molecules can revive the brain back so it goes back to function. The medical history would never accept this until they have the concrete results on the trials and testings. So I'm also thinking to work on the animal models on the basis of understanding what the behavior they are in. For example, we can artificially give certain kind of situation into animals that they act in a different way in a conscious and unconscious state, and try to mimic this as a humans and do the similar aspects of providing these molecules which are available in these natural herbs. And my target is also to look at not just psilocybin from psychedelics, but many other molecules that are naturally available, that has not been synthesized. I know that if you look into the legitimate institution that allows these, for example, FDA or Health Canada or any other European health ministries, they only allow synthetic version. The reason being because it's a quicker result. They know it works. But the natural way, naturopathy is so important that we've been missing in humans, that whatever we consume on a daily basis has some impact in our body. Whatever we eat, for example, if you eat banana every day, it provides us potassium. If you eat carrot, it gives you vitamin E, vitamin C. If you give lemon, it gives you this. If you eat tomatoes, it gives you lycopene. So all this combination of natural products, or even the meats that we have, has influence in our body.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Hyder. There's so much to distill down here. Number one, food is medicine, something that we were never trained enough in medical school about how important our diet is. Number two, dealing so much in cannabis medicine, and cannabis is 500 or so different compounds that are all playing a role, interacting with each other to give a heightened effect. With some of these psychedelic compounds, it might be a little bit more simple. There might not be quite as many compounds playing a role, which I think will have an impact in the ability to bring some drugs to market. And the last thing I wanted to say is how incredibly fascinating it is to think about what consciousness means and what is unconscious and what is conscious. I had a professor in zoology way back in the day, way back at Washington State, who used to say that he thought that sleep state or REM state was the primary state, was the default state, I guess I should say, which was incredibly fascinating to think about, these big world problems, big life kind of issues, like what is reality and what is the conscious mind and what is going on in our unconscious state. But it's such an incredible area to study. I know I've seen some studies now on what is death and what is cell death actually, and can you reperfuse cells and create activity again even after anoxia has set in. And it's just absolutely fascinating to think that maybe with psychedelics we could bridge that gap and make some profound changes in these areas of medicine. It's really exciting.
I think, for example, there's a lot of studies has been done. I mean, cannabis has been known for millennia, and people rely on it. And in many communities, it's been used as a ritual. Same for psychedelics as well. And the use, I just feel it as a doctor. I see that if any legitimate substance been used as an abuse for, it's not a proper way of putting in and asking to legalize as a medical as well as a recreational. I always against the recreational market, but I don't want to say it that it's against to everybody. For example, if anyone puff cannabis, now it's a crude cannabis that goes into a system. So he has, mental problem, for example, stress, or he has a pain in his knee, or he's anything. He feels so good because it's a crude goes in and it, soothes everything. But how much material or how much molecules have got into his body might be toxic to his liver. We are not sure. So then recreational market is not control. For medical purposes, always a control. And that's the reason I should always, that if you have a depression, if you have anxiety, or if you have a pain, if you have a cancer, for God, in any disease you have, and if you use cannabinoid in a proper way, through a pharmaceutical, through a nutraceutical background, or from a pharmacy recommendation at a prescribed dose, I think is always going to help in a very proper way. But not just that, putting together in such a way in a combinational drug therapy. That's also one of the ideal area that we should focus on. For example, I used to work when I founded a company called InMed Pharmaceuticals. We worked on glaucoma and it become, publicly traded company. So we were focused on ocular pressure in the human eye. And one of my colleagues developed some delivery method where he can put it on and he can have a delivery into our eye. But I was also suggesting that we should also work on other areas. So we worked on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in the liver. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease happens to people who are obese and eat mostly junk food. So what happens, the liver swallow and it becomes cirrhosis. And when it's cirrhosis, it's probably the end of its liver and it's hard to bring it back. So only medicine available in the area in pharmaceutical industries, vitamin E or daily exercise to reduce the cirrhosis. So I developed a capsaicin compound which binds to a receptor called TRPV1 in the liver. And with the help of cannabinoids to soothe the liver, if you have a combination drug therapy, it gives you more and reduce the level of cirrhosis in the livers. This is just one of the examples that I'm giving. Same idea for these psilocybin or other materials you bring, or psychedelic material like DMT, MDMA, LSDs. There's so many other molecules. Some are synthesized, some are natural. If you do a combination of it, it will help alleviate many problems. For example, people who have cancer. So cancer therapeutics as a chemotherapy, but if you reduce and have an anti-inflammatory product included in it, let's say you add Indian Ayurvedic, maybe turmeric as an anti-inflammatory, or some compounds that can take away the necessity, like most of the cancer patients are always complain that they don't feel hungry and they lose a lot of hairs. The weight loses very rapidly. So how we can help as a team in a global way, that these doctors, physicians who are sitting and listening, we can do a combination drug therapy, easy to purchase for the patients to consume it and not be situation that they feel fear of, and also not have a toxic effect in the liver. So I think it's so important that sometimes people fear of stigmatics also, that people in the mental health, especially everyone 100% are in mental stress, depression, anxiety, including everybody, us. The issue is that we don't show us, we don't want to tell because it's a stigma, how people will feel it. But I think now world is open. You should tell it what problems you have, how easy you can take. Medicine is one way of taking it, but virtually having the traditional methods, remedy by yourself, yoga or meditation, it's very soothing in those areas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. I tell my patients all the time that cannabis or other psychedelics are one way of activating your endocannabinoid system, but they're not the only way of activating your endocannabinoid system. And another thing that you touched on is you said that you're not a big fan of adult use, but you're very supportive of medical use. And I really echo that in that with THC, we'll just go ahead and talk about Delta 9 THC. There's such a potential for abuse with that because we have taken a plant that was historically very low in THC and much higher in CBD. And we've really bastardized it over the years, that we've bred increasingly stronger and stronger and stronger THC plants so that the cannabis experience becomes a lot more like a Schedule 1 drug instead of what Mother Nature intended it to be. And so it's so important that we do get good education and we get good research to see what is the optimal amount of THC. We know that THC works better when it has other compounds, whether it's beta-caryophyllene or CBD, and certainly terpenes are directing the traffic as far as the effects of these cannabinoids on our experience. It's really striking. I know that in Canada, you guys are struggling similarly as we are with having ubiquitous cannabis exposure almost. It's in, I think, 38 or 40 states at this point here. And it's sad to me that the good things, the CBDs, are harder to find, those good anti-inflammatories. And unfortunately, the products that are sold are just so high in THC. It's so important to think about this holistically, like you say. I love the Ayurvedic practice. I've been exposed to that. I use that as an example all the time, in that a small amount is a medicine, but a large amount is a poison. And it's the conversation I have with my patients every day when I do consults with them. And I really love your approach to just kind of global, holistic health. Food is medicine, meditation, exercise. And yeah, let's get some better education as far as psychedelics and the endocannabinoid system. It's all related. And I think we're just really in our infancy. So we wanted to learn a little bit more about what you're doing right now, what research you're working on right now. And then I know we have lots more to talk about. So take it away, Hyder.
So currently I'm focusing on a coma resurrection. So I'm developing a therapy called coma resurrection therapy. And it's related to people who are in a vegetative state for either traumatic brain injury or being in this situation due to a stroke, or have a mental problem, or even a pressure in the brain for certain reason. They might get a stroke. They might go into a very, very deep, mental damage that happens. And due to that reason, they go into a coma. So coma itself is not a disease. Coma is a symptom. As we all know, coma is a symptom. The vegetative state is a state. But the reason they are in the coma is that we have to tackle here. What I'm working is basically my company, a small company called Transcendent Life Sciences, Inc. So transcendent mean the word is very unique. It gives, anything related to human transcendent, where it can change the behavior of your mental well-being and increase or deplete the necessary information that you want. And life sciences, because anything related to life that has been encompassed in that. So I'm looking into a coma resurrection, how to revive people from coma, which is a hardcore theory. But I think, and I believe firmly that I can do that, not by myself, of course, with a team of people around the world, scientists, that this could be a breakthrough in the history of medical, lifetime, if you could look at. There is many claims around the world that the patient who was in coma, basically his mind is dead, or his brain is dead. And due to that reason, this person cannot come back to life. But you might have experienced in your life, I have experienced many times that people in coma come back after 3 months, come back after 6 months, or might have come in 1 week without any notice. They just show up and they come up. If you ask them what experience you have or what did you see, few people are able to tell you what happened, but some people would say that we were stuck into the time. We know that this happened that day, but we don't know which day it was. We are just feeling that we born again today, and that's what we see. They don't know really what happened. So where the problem is basically the time when traumatic brain injury happens. It could be either structural damage to the brain or non-structural damage. When it's a structural damage, when a brain was really struck with something, an accident damage or a gunshot, that's hard for us to really bring those people back from that kind of condition because damage has been done into the brain itself. But if it's a neuron damage where the neuron circuit's been mismatched or the circuit has moved due to an injury, we can always bring it back by using in-house lab experiments in a very sophisticated environment where the medical team should be there. We can see the networking that's happening in the brain, the traffic that has. If you look into MRIs of any of a human brain and you look into what's happening, you can see there's a bombardment of transmitter neurons are running here and there, and you feel what crazy thing you are looking at because it's so many information been transmitting, so many information are being stored, so many information is just there for us because your body is very active mode. When I command to move my hand, it's natural. It's not that I'm saying, it's just natural. It's a flux, that influx that happens. It's like when you're playing a table tennis and you are so expert, when you see the ball coming, your eyes coordination is such that automatically you hit the ball. I mean, these kind of things, even rapidly, millions of seconds rapid, the neuron circuits really work. Now, what happens is some of the neuron circuit didn't find the path, so it moved to a different path. It might have to go this area, but they have gone due to the damage that happens. Now, these molecules that we are working, I'm working on psilocybin or psilocine, which comes from magic mushrooms, well-known magic mushroom. People are working on it. And these molecules can legally be used. Only authorized people who got the license can work on. You can work and use these molecules and try to, administer these people who are in coma or vegetative states. At this moment, we haven't gotten approval to do any testing on right in humans because they need a consent. Without consent, you cannot really go for doing the treatments to these vegetative people or coma patients. So that's why we are also running the advocacy, being all these legislators that, how come these people give a consent if they are in that mode? So can relative give the consent? If relative can give the consent, yes, you can use this administration to bring them back. Why not? So I have going through a lot of things like advocacy of this, that psilocybin psychedelics should be given to these people in those kind of stages. But many of the, discussion that I had, they always fear of that is going to be a compound of many financial strength that we need to do this research on this kind of people, because it's not easy. And whatever you are saying is very hard. One person maybe can come back to life. What about the others? I said is one person is a more than 100%, because for the family, it's so important that person needs to come back. So I can still fight until the end that we need to revive these people. We don't say that these people are dead forever, even though live for 2 years just on sitting on the bed. Why don't we bring them back as a CPR kind of things? So I believe internally that one day medical team around the world, whoever, will be able to bring this. I put a seed in that this is a theory, but it's based out of a real story behind that these people have a chance to live and they should come back. Even a young people, kids who are in accident, go in coma, they have full life to live. What our company is doing mostly working on LSD, the DMTs, MDMAs, and the psilocybins to administer these by looking into animal models, and a very low dose, because we don't know what dosage, what percentage you should give. Their whole body is lying. So we want to figure it out how the connectivity happens.
So what are you seeing in the lab that's gotten you so excited about this? Can you give the listeners a little bit of just sort of background as to what you are seeing, what you think you will see in the future?
Yeah, so what I see that the movement of the reflexes that happens during these kind of treatments that you give. For example, I can always resonate this with people who are normal, for example. So people who are in a conscious state and people who are unconscious state. What are the unconscious and conscious states? And then example that I gave earlier. While you are in a sleep, while you're very low mode, what happened? Your state of mind is your rhythms are very slow and you're very at a soothing stage, where your senses are still awake, but they are not as active as you are awake. And the reasoning I always give is like touching a hot water or cold water. You can always do that by putting the fingers in and feel the feelings of it, whereas the unconscious people cannot. So what I see as a result of that these molecules had a way of igniting or sparking these neurons that they can bombard back and find their ways for communication. And once they communicate, they can tell the mind, they wake up or open your eyes, the command system comes back to life. It's like giving an example again for someone that can understand, like when our computer is connected and our Wi-Fi goes away and we see why is the internet not working, the one thing we do is unplug the plug and put it back, or we reboot the Wi-Fi system. Now, again, it's easy saying it because it's machine, but our brain is also a natural machine. It takes so much information better than our computers, and still we consider it weak. I argue that this machine has so much information and so much capability to revive these people back to a normal life. And that's what Transcendent Life Lab is working.
I love this. So you think that the psychedelics are going to help reboot the brain and help it restart and find connections that it didn't have before. That's absolutely fascinating. We are just starting to see some of this research in psychedelic medicine come, and I know, obviously we're right down the street from Hopkins. I know Hopkins is doing some of these trials. I've actually talked to patients who are having some of these treatments done. And it's just absolutely fascinating to see what's happening with things like depression. We have had pharmaceutical options to treat depression that have lots of side effects that then you have to deal with. And you're just really putting a Band-Aid on instead of potentially solving the problem. And that's what's so exciting about some of these psychedelics. If we could actually solve the problem, and if a patient is comatose and needs to be jump started, I mean, we're really going to be solving the problem then of getting them those circuits that they need to be functional. It's absolutely fascinating. I love where your research is headed. Are you stymied the same as we are in the States with the legality of things in Canada? Like what hurdles are you struggling against?
Yeah, there's a lot of hurdles, of course, because the it's not easy to convince to people who really did not experience and come from a background that is not necessarily in science. So to convince them that how does it really work, it's like give an example of OGM, and you say, no, this organism, which is the genetically modified organism, right? GMO, and they just say, you have a GMO, genetically modified, and it's nothing to do with that. So how to convince these people who really think that this is a modified version of it's a quality wise, and as a scientist, we always can back up. Now, there's another problem also is a war on drugs kind of thing. People consider this that is some sort of a recreational part of it, and people are putting a lot of wrong kind of stamps on it, saying that this is kind of something that people should go for, like people go for a trip and people enjoy this as a part of changing of their life. For sure, we understand that part as well, but not necessarily only for recreation. It's more profoundly for our medical purposes. So, for example, in last few decades, doctors been recommending the SSRIs for people who are in depression, heavy depression, and they take this and they become addicted for a longer period of time and hard to take them off from it. Now, ketamine is probably the way to go for it, and because they don't have addiction, you just use it for like a few days and then you're done and you're okay with that and you're back to your track, right? So these researchers around the world, including myself and many others who are doing a groundbreaking work, needs to come up with those kind of solutions and advocate with the government, saying that this is not the drug or medicine that you've been thinking. It's more of a lifesavers. It's more of a life-saving. The only thing in our world we have in a whole body that governs our whole body is a brain. If a brain functions properly, you can even alleviate the personal health, and also you can alleviate the community around you, the people who are reflecting such, you can go around the road and you see so many people driving crazy, and your mental illness, if you're not balanced, you either argue why you're driving this way, that way. These all are under control of these kind of situation that we bring on if you don't advocate at the right time for right community. I think government need to step up, also support this journey, not be very monopoly to certain kind of institution or certain kinds of researchers. I think it should be open and available to general public, which is so important. Lifesaver is the most important. You have to be better than treatment is to cure yourself, but at the same time, if you're already prepared for it and make sure that you are aligned to it, it's never going to happen. In my personal lives, in ours, if you feel healthy, it's just because we are eating and we are being but at the same time, if we keep it that way, it will last longer. But life has its own lessons to teach, and every lesson you learn for listening, hearing, you can see how different we have to be in a situation where there's a necessity and you cannot do it because you are a doctor, you want to help it, but you cannot help it because government have sealed it for us and you cannot really help them.
It's so frustrating because we're certainly dealing with an absolute epidemic of vast proportions in the mental health arena. My patients cannot get in to see a mental health care provider. And if they do, it's certainly not covered by insurance. It's all self-pay, which is great if you have disposable income and not so great if you don't. And so anything that we can do in the realm of mental health to ease suffering, and like you said, it starts and stops with the brain. If our brains are healthy, then our bodies are healthy. And it's such an exciting area of study. And I think that there's a stigma that goes along with psychedelics, much as there is with cannabis. And it is up to researchers such as yourself to get us that much needed data so that we can start to change minds and help educate people. So Hyder, I want to end with a question. If you could invent a chemical or a compound, what would it be and what would it do and why?
It's a good question. I think if I get an inventor molecule, I will invent a molecule to be human. So that molecule would be a human, meaning it's a collaboration, it's a combination, it's a knowing of a nature, how close we are and still don't feel it. It's kind of that. So it's a mix of a lot of things, which as we unite together on all the aspects, it's itself is an antidote. It's itself is so powerful that can alleviate all this. But as a scientist, if you're asking me what molecules you are looking for, I would rather go for psilocybin, psilocybin, LSDs, MDMAs, the cactus from the cactus, they have the Todd, they have this Bufo Todd, they have these molecules. Each molecule has its own efficacy and own adversity. If you take a salt, 2 spoons in your food, it's toxic to you, like you mentioned. If you take sugar, it's 2 spoons, but sugar it's sweet, salt is salt. But again, more you take, it's bad for you. If I would be given a chance to have something that I invent in this molecules would be a combinational antidote, which would be a combination product that is so easy to have for general use that it take away everything. So it could not necessarily psilocybin, not necessarily psychedelics or anything. It should be something medicine comes out from natural that can help heal the brain first and then the body, because the brain is the one core that covers. And the most important part is if you are emotionally healthy, then your emotionally and all well-being will be very stronger. Emotionally healthy is so important in this kind of work. Anything you do, anything you read, anything you eat should affect your emotions. If your emotions are strong and they are very fast too. So for example, if I have to communicate and take a phone and call someone, the emotions play so fast that if I think of my mom in heaven, I think of someone, I can just communicate very frequently. So how we can have that ability in ourselves to heal our mental health and well-being without fear of stigma. Just be very brave, come out and say, I have this issue. I can discuss with this. It doesn't mean that I'm different. And we should value human. So I think my magic molecule would be human.
I love it. I love your vision for the future. I love your imagination and where you think that we could go and where we could be as a race of people. I think that's actually beautiful and I love it. So if people want to learn more about you and want to reach out to you directly, Dr. Khoja, how can they do that?
They can either email it to me. My LinkedIn profile is a more powerful one that they can reach, that has an email address, my phone number too. But if they really are interested, I can give you my email address that you can add it into this interview for them to communicate directly. I will always welcome, positive critics on whatever they think it. And critics are always important because it lets you improve. And I would also say that failure is the only step one for you to be successful. More failures you do, again, you go down, but failure is the first step to step on and then go. So I could be failed in many areas in coming years with this research, but with the support of medical doctors, with the support of these individuals who really understand the philosophy behind the necessity and the advocacy, can bring the value to the generation to come. Because how long anyone can live? There's a path, there's a time. But if you put a seed in the ground, the chances are that it will sprout soon and bring value to a new generations for new kind of technologies to come. And I always support that.
Well, Hyder, you've given me a lot of hope for the future. You really have. I think that your passion is so commendable. And I look forward to learning all about your research. And I'm sure we're going to talk again soon. If you haven't yet registered or subscribed to AJEM, please do so. You are helping to bridge the education gap by bringing peer-reviewed research and scientific evidence from around the world directly to physicians' inboxes. Please visit us at endocannabinoidmedicine.com. We'll see you again next time, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Have a great day.